Oh, good afternoon. I'm Ruth Lindsey and I live in Hardraw, North Yorkshire, where I founded Natural Dales Wool Products in 2021. Welcome to our session, How Can Peatland Restoration Targets Be Achieved Without Alienating Use of the Land? We live in a society which is increasingly polarised, with combative and aggressive language becoming more frequent. Opinions are expressed, often on social media, without any thought about how they will affect the person or organisation being targeted. I submitted an abstract for the conference session after reading over the last 12 months a number of posts on social media and articles in the news where it was apparent that the writer had thought little about the opposite point of view or the shades in between. There is no doubt that restoring peatland is a climate imperative. The increasing frequency of extreme weather events cannot be denied. On the 24th of March this year, 75 millimetres of rain was recorded at Newby Head Pass, North Yorkshire, in a single day. Many roads and fields in Upper Wensleydale were flooded for the second time in 2 weeks. How do we move forward with restoration whilst taking stakeholders with us? How do we conduct consultation sessions that are fully inclusive? Are peatland practitioners guilty of making decisions without understanding their impact or implications? Is our language divisive or lacking empathy? In March 2026, Wild Justice won a High Court ruling that Dartmoor Commons have been mismanaged by Dartmoor Commoners Council, which did nothing to assess or prevent overgrazing, allowing the deterioration of important wildlife areas. There are 850 commoners. The council consists of 20 commoners' seats, 2 representative owners of commons, 2 from Dartmoor National Park Authority, 1 from the Duchy of Cornwall and 1 vet. Will this approach solve the problem? I've sat on many church committees over the years, and finding agreement between a dozen people is hard enough. I can't imagine trying to coordinate a meaningful reduction in grazing with so many stakeholders. On the 27th of May, the Woodland Trust announced an appeal to raise £4.86 million to acquire 340 acres of Snaezone Valley near Hawes to restore the land and provide pathways for the current red squirrel population. Community engagement events were held in 2021. These, however, will not address the current tension which exists between those who farm land to produce food and, as a local farmer said, those who plant trees. The red squirrel is actually in our garden. We're near Simonston and there's a red squirrel population in Shawgill Wood. So they're not just in Snaezone, they're all around the town. In this session, we're bringing to the fore personal stories and the very real challenges faced by land managers. We are aiming to move beyond assumptions and towards genuine understanding, enable respectful discussion through facilitated dialogue, foster empathy and new perspectives, identify constructive ways forward, produce a set of shared messages including a summary document capturing farmers' voices, and to use the document after the conference ends to help guide more collaborative peatland restoration efforts. Peat restoration in upland areas includes areas of hill farming. In January 2025, the Green Allowance reported that upland grazing farms typically had the lowest farm incomes, an average of £23,500 in 2024, even with government payments and unpaid labour. Upland farmers are usually family businesses where life on the land starts at an early age. It's hard with very few financial rewards. The task of balancing the books is difficult and the pressure is real. What led me to submit this abstract? I'm not from a farming background, however I was born into a Bradford textile family. In the late 19th century, Bradford was considered to be the wool capital of the world. In 1886, my great-grandfather, Henry Herbert Parkin, walked from rural Sheffield, South Yorkshire, to Bradford for a job. He became an office boy at the Multiple Fabric Company, a company he owned by the 1930s. So the man on the my right, your left, with a very good moustache is my great-grandfather. And the small boy in the middle is Fred, my grandfather, who is in the middle picture. In the 1890s, the company made multi-layer woven matting from natural fibres, including camel hair, horse hair, mohair and wool. Their main export market was the Middle East. Over the course of the 20th century, 3 further generations joined the business. My grandfather, my dad and uncle in the late 1980s, myself. So my father is this one, and my uncle is this one. Over the course of the 20th century, they changed the direction of the business many times. After the Suez Crisis of 1952, when their traditional markets virtually disappeared overnight, they embraced weaving the new synthetic fibres of the 1940s and 50s and overcame the challenges of the 3-day week in the 1970s and the recessions of the 1980s and 1990s. My childhood was marked with being told over the dinner table when employees were going to be made redundant. My dad brought more work home in a cardboard box each evening as the number of employees reduced. I went to Leeds University to study textile management in 1985 and asked to go into the family business in my final year. After an interview of 2 hours and 4 weeks of waiting, I was told I could have a job as product development manager. In 1990, we took the decision to close the spinning part of the business and to concentrate on industrial textiles. This resulted in more redundancies. However, in 5 years, we doubled the turnover of the business and it became profitable once again. I was the only member of my generation interested in the business. I wanted to start a family and knew I could not run the mill on my own. Another family-owned Yorkshire business we knew well was approached about purchasing the company. In December 1997, the day the relevant documents were signed and ownership was transferred, my dad came in my office and said with tears in his eyes, "We've done it. I feel like I've sold the family silver." We went down into the mill with the new owners and he told the employees of the sale. He had devoted 50 years of his life to the business apart from 2 years national service in Egypt. He was a quiet, shy Yorkshireman who developed himself to meet the demands of his responsibilities over the year. On summer evenings whilst in the garden, he sorted out the mill's problems in his head. Owning a business in his eyes came with social responsibilities to the local community which could not be separated from the business. He provided employment for prisoners released on parole to give them a foot on the employment ladder. He helped employees in financial difficulty by advancing wages and taking repayments out of their pay packets over a number of weeks. He was a school governor at the local primary school. He died in March 1999 from cancer and didn't see the long-term positive results of my uncle and his joint decision. The company is still thriving today, still employing people in Bradford making up textiles for industrial purposes, and in Wetherby fabrics are woven. He developed 70 years ago. I was on maternity leave from the family business where I was works manager at the time he died and didn't feel able to go back. After career break as a mother to 2 girls, I became a business coordinator in a healthy living centre, a finance manager in a monastery, and an administrator at a rope maker's in Hawes till it closed in 2022. In 2018, my husband became seriously ill and was diagnosed with Behçet's disease, a rare autoimmune condition. Juggling a family and caring for Philip whilst working was difficult and at times felt impossible. I wanted to find a new career that would allow more flexibility, where I had more control over my time. In the summer of 2021, I became aware of hundreds of coconut fibre logs being flown onto Stack's Fell for peat restoration. I had a light bulb moment. Could wool be used to make an equivalent product? The wool price had been low for years, particularly for coarse mountain wools. Farmers were burying and burning wool rather than taking it to British Wool for auction. The annual shearing of sheep for health reasons costs around £1.50 per sheep at that time. A farmer would receive 10 to 20p per fleece. The fall in the wool price has been painful to watch. My grandfather Fred went to the wool exchange in Bradford on Thursday afternoons until its closure, where wool contracts were sealed on the shake of a hand and wool was a prized commodity. I used my family's textile knowledge and the internet to find contacts in companies I'd known 5 years before to work out a manufacturing path for the logs. Using large commercial processes in the north of England, I developed a route from raw fleece to finished log. 4 local farmers agreed to give me their fleeces. I was awarded a FIPL grant by the Yorkshire Dales National Park and with 1 tonne of fleeces I was able to manufacture the first products. Natural Dales Wool's products was a reality. I formed a partnership with the wool keepers who purchased raw fleeces direct from farmers and at agreed market-leading price, and the first logs went on to Fleet Moss, the North York Moors and Dartmoor in March 2023. 3 years later, my geotextile products have a UK trademark Lana and are on sites of peat restoration, re-wetting of the land, natural flood management and coastal erosion prevention. Business and life are tough. Last autumn a competitor appeared who'd taken my vision local wool for local peat and produced wool logs of the same shape filled with clean wool and entered the market. The reality of my business is working 3 days a week in the local spa shop to provide regular income and fitting Natural Dales wool products in on the other days of the week. Online meetings and visits are arranged for my days off and emails are sent in between. Tasks are juggled around family responsibilities. Am I any nearer fulfilling my dream of a business giving me enough income to decrease the juggling? No, but I'm working hard to achieve that goal. Why do I consider listening with empathy and constructive dialogue so important? Mental health problems are becoming increasingly prevalent in society. In February 2026, the Office for National Statistics reported that mental health well-being among farmers had fallen to its lowest level in 4 years. 47 suicides were registered in England and Wales among people working in farming and agriculture during 2024. Male suicide in the UK is the single leading cause of death for men under 50. Men account for approximately 75% of all UK suicides, with approximately 14 men dying by suicide every day. My brother took his own life due to depression 16 years ago. The pain of loss is always in the background. Family occasions are still joyful but hard at the same time, because there is a gap where Andrew should be. He was a loving father, loyal friend, protective brother and talented engineer. I have heard many opinions and judgments regarding suicide. When I read or hear of Mill's suicide, I know something of the pain that the family will feel, but also mourn the loss to society of their talents. Andrew, who is on nearest me, was Bradford Council's Highways Asset Manager. Here is an extract from the announcement of his death in the Manywells Landfill Remediation newsletter of October 2010. He worked on some very successful projects, including the Manywells Landfill Remedial Works, for which the team won a public award for its communication strategy. It was his suggestion to set up the community working group, which was a valuable way of ensuring the communications between the village and the council worked well. Andrew's presentations at the neighbourhood forum meetings and the Manywells community working group were always lively and very hands-on. He was able to explain complex technical aspects of the work in novel ways. At one meeting, he demonstrated leachate in a landfill using a bucket and sponge. We are the result and the sum of our history and our experiences. The panel will share their personal stories to provoke thought and develop better understanding. My mother died in November 2022, aged 87 years. She left 4 grandchildren who were between 20 and 27 years old at the time. She was housebound. They were scattered around the country, but all phoned her regularly for a chat. They missed the way she listened. I've been told by them that she listened properly, heard what they were saying and offered support, love and guidance. Real listening is a skill. I ask that we all listen with open minds and leave any preconceptions at the door. During our questions and discussions, please respect the views which are different from your own and consider their roots. Nelson Mandela said about understanding others, by lumping people into categories, we stop recognising them as individuals. We are no longer able to put ourselves in their shoes. They are in front of us, but we do not see them.